Welcome to the Wellbeing Room. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Danielle O'Donoghue, who is a yoga teacher, whole foods chef, mum, and all-round amazing human being. She lives in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, just west of Sydney, and teaches classes, workshops, and retreats from her gorgeous purpose-built studio, the Octagonal Space. Danielle and I met many moons ago in our early 20s, I think. And I've always been amazed by Danielle's passion for whole foods and also her love of gardening. I've asked her to join us in the Wellbeing Room today to talk about all things food. And I'm sure we're going to uncover some interesting things along the way. So, welcome, Danielle.
Hi, thanks, Leah.
So good to have you here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And I would love to start off today. And I know this may sound a bit silly, but I'd just love to know a bit more about how you got into whole foods. Like for me, it was when I started yoga and I started learning about macrobiotics, and that's when I sort of uncovered, oh, this whole thing about a whole foods. But I have a feeling that you maybe have a bit more experience and grew up maybe with whole foods in your life. So yeah, please share with us and tell us a bit about your whole foods history. Let's call it that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I've always been interested in food to some degree, and I did grow up in a whole food household. My mother sort of was kind of a bit of a subscriber to the Dorothy Hall philosophy of food, like natural foods, and I actually ended up studying herbal medicine with Dorothy Hall later on. But we had her books in our house. My dad actually was also got into macrobiotics really early when we were kids, and I have memories of chewing rice 100 times and having brown rice and tahini and kelp, and it was a very boring form of macrobiotics, I have to say. But yeah, so that was in my upbringing, and my dad went through a bread making phase where he made like potato bread and all these and nut butters and things like that. And yeah, my mum we didn't have kind of lots of sweets and crazy things in the house. It was just basic simple food. And another thing my mum actually also used to do, which because we had a large family, I'm one of 4 kids, she would put on these like dinners where there would just be like a smorgasbord of all different types of things. So like, cold meats, potatoes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, cheese. And we could actually just kind of pick what we wanted to put on our plate, which obviously it's not practical for smaller families to do, but on a big family, it's great because you learn to start listening to your body and just eat what it feels like eating. And then I guess my mum sort of thought was if I don't have bad food in the house, anything that is chosen is a health supportive thing. So yeah. And then as I kind of got older and more responsible for my own eating, I've always been really interested in different kind of dietary philosophies and wanting to have the healthiest kind of way of eating. And for a long time, actually, before I was pregnant with my son, my health was, what I felt like eating was basically based on whatever the latest thing I'd read was. And I just went into so many different things and read so many different things. But it was all very cerebral. It wasn't, I was quite disconnected from my body, despite that kind of upbringing thing. I think I really got into the head thing of it a little bit too much. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my son that I actually was so tuned in. Like you just get, I don't know if the same thing happened with you, you just get this incredible intuition around what you need to eat, and you just crave it, and you actually can't eat the things that you don't want to eat or that aren't good for you. Yeah. And so I had like a head thing running around macrobiotics thinking, oh, that, I should have miso soup and shiitake mushrooms and these types of things. And every time I picked up those products, I just nearly threw up. So I was wow, I can eat.
What were you craving during pregnancy? Now I'm curious.
Yeah, well, strangely enough, I was craving oranges, and it was really bizarre because that was pretty much the only thing I could eat. I was actually working at the time at the retreat centre down in the Otford Valley for the Hare Krishna one there. And I was in the kitchens all the time and really struggling because there's so many strong spices and smells of food. I was like, oh, I just can't deal with any of this. Yeah. And yeah, oranges was what I felt like. And I actually had a macrobiotic pregnancy book that I thought I was going to follow and do the full macrobiotic pregnancy. And in the book, it was saying things like, if you crave oranges, try not to have oranges because they're too strong and they're too tropical. And even though I don't really think oranges are actually tropical, I think they're temperate.
No. Yeah, exactly.
But and it was saying like that you should try sauerkraut. And I'm thinking, well, you've obviously never been a pregnant woman craving an orange because it's not the same thing.
That's right. Sauerkraut is a far cry from oranges.
It totally. And then, you know, they had silly things in there. I mean, because I know there's a very judgmental aspect of macrobiotics, which is what I probably was drawn to at first, because I've had a big journey of softening the judgment and the hard line kind of attitude in my life. And at that time, I was reading it and it's saying, you know, don't have the oranges because too many oranges can cause birth defects in the child. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't even want to take that concept into my consciousness. So I just put it away basically and said, I'm not even going to follow that at all.
Yeah.
And I decided I was just going to listen to my body and eat what it felt like eating, as long as it was like a whole food. And that's like what I advocate now for people when I'm teaching them to cook, rather than trying to teach someone a system or a philosophy as such. I say, if you can just get rid of the highly processed foods and then come back to just eating whole foods, you can pretty much trust what your body feels for, you know.
So
it's
important.
The extreme, it's the extreme foods that create like cravings for the opposite. But if you kind of come to a more neutral diet and natural whole foods, I think anything that nature provides has got an amazing benefit.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. I just want to expand on that because, you know, I hear a lot of stories about women when they're pregnant, you know, they're craving ice cream and craving whatever, you know, really extreme food. And I think there's this belief in society at present where it's like, well, I'm pregnant, I can eat what I like. And if my body's craving that, then that is totally fine. Where I'd be interested in your opinion on that. I mean, when I was pregnant, I was craving tabbouleh, which is really strange. So, I
know. I strangely had cravings from my childhood, like tastes from my childhood. And I think that kind of touches on to how important it is to give your child exposure to as many different foods as you can when they're young, because it kind of does program in where you can get certain nutrients from. And your body, rather than going, I want calcium, is going to say, I want sesame seeds, or I want cheese, or I want, you know, whatever food that it has a knowing reference for that nutrient in a way. Because, calcium doesn't really exist in isolation, and don't go and eat it like that. So I actually was craving Jarlsberg cheese and gherkins.
That's a great combination.
I know, but that was the thing that I'd had as a child. We used to have gherkins and cheese, and it was really that particular cheese and that gherkin, like, and I was like, wow, that's so interesting. So of course I tried to find pickles without sugar in them this time around. Because I had and that did satisfy the craving. So it's interesting if you know a more whole food version of that, you can try. But sometimes it's just, you know, if it's a real food, just go for it.
That's right. It's a real food.
Ice cream, you might think, okay, it's something, there's dairy there, there's fat there. You might try and look for something that has similar things that isn't quite so strong, because it's not a real food. It's not.
No, that's right. Yeah. Unfortunately,
or if you were to eat ice cream, I would have like real ice cream made with real cream and milk and eggs and that kind of thing, rather than there's so many fake ice creams out there.
And they put so many fillers and other, you know, chemically processed products to make it freeze longer because it's transported over long distances. So something locally made is good.
Yes, exactly. So there's all different levels that you can go, but trying to be as whole and natural as you can, I think, is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The body as a whole, I don't think can even recognize half the foods that are in the supermarkets these days, because they're not food. I mean, even when you look at milk, there's so many different kinds of milk, and they can't even call it milk anymore because it's so far removed from milk, like the way it's, you know, homogenized and pasteurized and had the fat all completely removed or had, some other thing to extend its life. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is this white liquid? Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And even the plant-based milks as well. I mean, they're not really much better, in all honesty. I mean, they put lots of different things in there to thicken it or to make it last longer, like you say, and things like that.
to make a good coffee. That's what they're also balanced, like sort of created for these days, the barista versions.
Yeah, that's right. Because we're all addicted to coffee as well.
Coffee, I know. But that was the thing, because I realized when because I've always been really mindful of the oils that I eat. And I don't eat like omega-6 oils. But I'm realizing that those oils are in every single plant-based milk, except for like there's a couple that I found that don't have like sunflower or canola or safflower or some kind of oil.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about the oil thing? Because I just have oil, I have my organic oils that I cook with and stuff, but why this interest in omega-6 and what's the story there?
So there's a thing that having a good omega-6, omega-3 balance is important for our health. And there's far more omega-6 oils in our diets due to processed foods, and they're the cheaper oils that, all vegetable oil is an omega-6 oil, and it's inflammatory. It's a pro-inflammatory oil. Whereas omega-3s, which you generally get from, fish, or there's some plant-based sources which are harder to kind of extract, but you'll find it in hemp and linseeds and things like that. They're anti-inflammatory oils, and they're also brain-feeding oils. So trying to like fix that balance by like avoiding those oils, because you also get obviously omega-6 from other things, and you do need some of it, but too much of those cheap and nasty vegetable oils just create inflammation in the body.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, I never have those in my, like, they're not in my kitchen. I try not to add them in.
Yeah.
I have like obviously olive oil. I have sesame oil.
Yeah.
But I don't have sunflower oil. I don't have canola oil.
Yeah.
And so I thought, why would I have these plant-based milks? Because it is the thing of whatever you do every day is what creates, the conditions or the things. And here I am thinking, well, I don't eat those oils, but then every day I'm having like a chai and with a plant-based milk. And I'm thinking, okay, so I have to actually just shift away from having those things that use those milks regularly, and like every now and then now I'll have a chai, as a treat, but it's not going to be like an everyday drink, because I realize that everyday thing that creates the problem. So I just try to go for more herbal teas now. My trouble wasn't how I got addicted into the chai, was that my partner is a coffee drinker. Okay, and so we go out for a drink at a cafe, and I struggle to pay $4.50 for a herbal tea bag in water. I'm like, at least give me milk and honey,
Yeah, that's right. Let's dress it up a bit for me.
The spices, like, let's make it something like you have to make it for if I'm going to pay that much. I have to
totally agree.
My mindset around that and go, okay, I'm paying for the experience. I'm paying to be at your place and use your your cups and whatever, and not have to pour the water myself. Anyway.
Yeah. I know. And it's like, you hope the cup is clean, because sometimes, like, I think when people get so I'm on a tangent, but when you buy a coffee, you can't really see the cleanliness of the cup necessarily, but when you get a tea, because it's just got the water in it, usually to start with, you'll see any bits that are that maybe haven't been cleaned properly. So that's a bit fussy when it comes to buying tea, like knowing which cafes you're going to get a clean cup in. It's really important.
It is. I mean, there's such a culture of it now, and it's like, it's that same thing. Like, if you don't drink alcohol and you don't drink coffee, you're kind of missing two huge social interactive things. And it's like, I realized even with my eating choices when I was younger, how I kind of isolated myself a lot, even from my family. And in family outings, I'd be like, bringing my own food or whatever, and it isn't a nice thing, because I do, through my kind of wider studies around food, I've realized that there's so many more aspects to food than just its kind of chemical constituents. It's how it's been made, it's the energy that's there, and the love that goes into it. And like, allowing your grandmother to feed you is just a beautiful thing. Like, if you can just accept whatever she gives you and like just take that with gratitude, I think there's a different level on there, even if it might have something in it that you're not completely, you know, into. That being said, it depends. I mean, my gran, she was so funny. I was vegetarian for a huge period of time, and she would make these vegetable soups, and I'd say, you know, is it vegetarian? Yes, darling, it's just a vegetable soup. And I'd be eating it and then finding a bit of chicken in the soup, and I'm like, what's this chicken doing in the soup? Oh, that just would have come off the bone, darling. I'm like, the bone? What? From the stock. It's not meat, darling. It's just a stock. I mean, how can you have a flavor in the vegetables? You know, I'm like, okay.
Yeah. You know, oh, Flint has something to say about that too. But no, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's something that I've often struggled with as well, is, you know, going to family gatherings, you know, and always wanting to bring my own food because I haven't necessarily wanted to eat what the family has made, or, you know, and it is divisive in a way, but I always bring enough to share with others. Like, so I want to share what I'm eating with them because I know that, you know, I've put love and energy into the food that I've brought. We're not saying that they haven't either, but I'm happy for them to share in what I'm eating as well, because I think that's important too, you know, and they always like what I've brought as well, which is good. Yeah,
it is. It's a challenge. I mean, because I find that every time, like, I go through like one of these cleanses or whatever, and like you get really clean and you feel so great in your body, and you just realize there's so many aspects of our society and so many things that are there just to bring your health down. And it's so hard because you're like, do I want to be this like uber healthy, amazing feeling person all on my own? Or do I want to, you know, it's like, and that's why I guess with the yoga and the things we try to create, the communities, I think that was a big aspect of the Oki yoga, that you know, so you have a community of people that are on the same page and that you can hang out with, and that you can all go and not have plant-based milk when you go to the cafe together, you know, like,
yeah, that's so true.
or go to each other's houses and have a cup of tea, you know, like a different thing. But you know, if you're the only one, it can be incredibly isolating, and you just start feeling a little bit lonely, and then, you know, you think, well, is it worth the while? And it's hard. It's something I still juggle, you know, juggle with.
I totally relate to that. And I found even like when I did a refresher teacher training with Andre online, so our yoga teacher, when we did the cleanses, especially, I found it actually hard to relate to my yoga students because I was feeling so clean and, you know, strong and balanced and energetic. And had these people coming in, you know, with ailments or whatever. And, you know, it's like, I felt so like, I just can't quite relate anymore to them in a way. So, you know.
It's so true. I have that same thing, like after doing, and you almost can't identify with how kind of tired or broken or pained someone is. It's like, and it's so interesting. And it's like, but I want you to feel like I do.
Yeah.
But not everyone can, I don't know, not everyone can have that discipline, or not everyone. I try to work out what it actually is, because I think maybe it's that people just don't actually believe that if they make that effort, it will happen. I don't know. Because
I think that's a really good point. I think there is a belief around it. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is that, you know, we can encourage people to eat well and move and do all these things. But unless we have, and this is something I've done as well, or not done, is the dialogue that goes with that is like, you know, the reason, you know, even, you know, don't worry about, you know, don't have the chocolate, it'll be okay, you know, your organs will get better, you won't even notice that you're missing it, that kind of thing. It's like, you know, but I really want the chocolate, but it's like, but it's okay, you can do without it, you'll be fine, you know, like it's that encouraging, you know, belief, and then building that belief that yes, I will be okay if I don't have that, or because I'm going to feel so much better without it. And that's something I do remember that Andre spoke a lot about when we were training and learning the yoga with him as well.
I know he was always a master at inspiring you and giving you reason not to do the thing. And I found, because I've been listening to lectures and classes of him recently, and just remembering like, okay, you do. I just get so motivated, but then it's like there's no other support for that in our world.
No, that's right. And like, and we were just talking just before we started the recording about the supermarket. And to me, the supermarket is one of those scary places you go to when you have to because you can't get other things.
Yeah, or because it's the shop, like your specialty shop, like it's closed because it doesn't have the same hours that, like, it's always open, you know.
Yeah, or for me, I don't really, there's no real specialty shop necessarily that would have all those other things that I would like at a price that I can afford, you know. So we have to venture into the supermarkets. And yeah, I'm curious about your experience there, how you feel about the food that you see in supermarkets and what you think that's doing to us as a, you know, as humans, as a culture and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I was saying to you before, I feel like there's a whole agenda in a way of things that are trying to pull us away from connecting with natural foods and preparing them ourselves. And it's like there's so many pre-prepared meals now. I walked into the supermarket the other day and I just looked, they've done a refurbishment and there's this whole wall of like refrigerated, pre-prepared meals. And I'm just like, wow, you know, it's, people aren't cooking anymore. Like even, and I'm thinking, how do you encourage people to do that? Like, how do you make it so that people will make that time, or how do you make it easy? And I know there's those companies like HelloFresh or other ones that, you know, Marley Spoon or whatever it is, and they give you all the food and the recipe and it's all like there in the box. And that's one thing. But then again, there's so much excess packaging with that. And, you know, and again, it's not the best quality food. And so I'm thinking I mean, really basic healthy food is cheap and really easy to do. But there just doesn't seem to be that information out there for people to easily connect to. And I feel like we're drifting further and further away from that. And that the supermarkets are feeding us worse and worse food. Like I was in the supermarket the other day and I was wanting to make soft shell tacos, and I thought they used to have a really nice soft shell taco, which was corn and lime and salt and water. That was it. And I'm like, that's what a taco was meant to be. But there's nothing like that in all the major brands. That you're lucky if they even use corn. Usually they use wheat because it's cheaper. And then you've got all this, you know, advertising for gluten-free, you know, soft shell tacos. And I'm like, gluten-free, it should be gluten-free. Corn doesn't have gluten in it. And I'm standing here and they've discontinued the one that I liked. The only one that was healthy. And it's only, you know, the major brands now. And I'm standing there looking at them just like in exasperation. And this woman comes up and she said, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for an actual real taco. Like, all this is rubbish. Like, gluten-free, it's like, of course they have to say gluten-free because usually they use wheat. And now this gluten-free taco hasn't even got corn in it as one of the ingredients. It's got tapioca starch and guar gum and, you know, all these other fillers to make it hold together. Whereas, you know, the traditional actual one was corn, salt, and water, you know, and then they would add lime to balance the nutritional deficiency in the corn and help release some of the other nutrients and stuff. But, you know, it's that sort of thing that I feel like I was getting really fired up about. And I thought, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and go through the supermarkets and start pointing out all the bad foods and like start a revolution, because we as humans, like as the consumers, we do have the power to say, we don't want that rubbish. We want this. And they will provide it for us if we can be bothered. Most people are like, oh, well, they don't have the one I want. I'll just get that one. You know, and nothing happens and no one mentions it. You know, so I actually didn't buy the tacos. I thought, I'm going to use a sweet potato.
Cool.
So I went and bought a sweet potato. We had roast sweet potatoes and loaded them with the kind of taco ingredients instead, because I'm like, I'm not going to conform to this thing. And it's having that resolve, you know, and realizing that the more we accept this rubbish food and these fillers and this stuff, the more, you know, it'll just keep coming to us.
It's so true. Yeah. And I really wish you would start that YouTube channel. I'll be your first subscriber. I've often thought about doing something similar actually myself.
I know.
You just want to take my phone and camera and just, talk about.
Go around and go, look, did you realize there's so many people, there's so many rubbish things and advertising things in the supermarket to try and trap people. And all those stupid health star ratings and heart ratings and whatever, they're just rubbish. They actually don't give you an idea of what the health of that product is.
No.
It's based on ridiculous parameters, you know.
Yeah. I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about Diet Coke, and in UK Diet Coke has like a 5-star health rating or something. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, surely everyone knows just from the get-go that Diet Coke is not a healthy thing.
That's right. You'd hope so.
No,
but it's not the case. It's so, I mean, I think it's a case of, you know, things were originally made more simply, just because the food processing, the technology, science necessarily wasn't quite as it is now. And I think there's been a lot of big money put into the technology, like food technology, food processing, trying to make things cheaper, you know, using those fillers to make things have a longer shelf life, be able to be transported across long distances, you know, made by machines rather than people. And so it's definitely taking us further and further away from the original food or the source of the food, you know, and like I've talked about in a previous episode, the key or the energy of that food has been stripped away through all these processes. Exactly. So you may as well just eat cardboard or something, you know, instead of a taco. Exactly. Like
even those bagged coleslaws and things like that, don't people realize that once something's been chopped into that size and sitting in a bag for days, I mean, what life force do you think is left in that food? Yeah. There's zero. I mean, it's just fiber.
Yeah. And I think that's people don't know that, and that's, I guess, why we're having this conversation, because we want people, and why you do what you do and why I do what I do is to share and inform people that, you know, food has an energetic signature to it, and it's key, it's life force, and the more we process it, the more that life force gets stripped away. And we're just left, like you say, with fiber and rotting food, really, in actual fact.
There's nothing there. And I feel so sad when you see those people who their kind of philosophy around food, and obviously, of course, everyone is in different financial situations, but it is what you put your importance on. And I know some people are like really excited to have a trolley full of food as cheap as they possibly can. And they get all the things on special, but they're all highly processed, full of sugar and additives and chemicals. And it's like, you're actually creating more trouble and spending of money for yourself because of all the health issues that are going to ensue when you base your diet on that.
Yeah.
Eating. It's, you know, for people to understand, to make the food that they put into their bodies a little bit more of a priority, and then they'll have like vitality and health.
Yeah.
And they won't be falling apart at age 40, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You know, it is a case of priorities and just having that understanding and knowledge. You know, for me, I've never, you know, I think after I turned, I don't know, early 20s, mid 20s, I gave up the health insurance. I'm like, why do I need health insurance? It's actually sickness insurance. Why don't I just put the money into maintaining my health and well-being through yoga, through eating, through exercise, you know, those key elements that are going to ensure that I stay healthy for longer, rather than just going, someone else's, it's going to be someone else's problem. I think that's the health insurance sort of field is like, well, I've always got that to fall back on. And I think it's great. You know, we obviously do need health insurance for certain things, you know, or, you know, thankfully we've got Medicare in Australia for certain things, but but, you know, put your money where your mouth is rather than rely on someone else to help you down the track. Maybe that's a bit one-sided, but I don't know, you know, you get what I mean. Hopefully.
Well, I subscribe to that same philosophy. I've always found it hard. Every time I look at the whole health insurance thing, I can't justify paying that amount of money away. I just think, well, I'd never get it back. And most people don't get it back. And unless, you know, you have an accident or but even with an accident, the thing is you tend to go into, you know, emergency care anyway, and you don't get to choose who's going to operate on you.
That's right. Yeah.
What's going to happen. So it's really, if a chronic health condition comes up, after, you know, over time, but, you know, I'm hoping that I won't.
Touch wood. Fingers crossed. So I want to get, I guess, and moving on, it's a good segue, health insurance, you know, eating the right food. And that's something you've obviously done a lot of studies. And like you said, you know, you've like ideology behind certain diets you've explored and experienced yourself. And I guess where you are now, and you've kind of evolved, like with the macrobiotic stuff. You recently gave a talk, or maybe it was like last year, at a Ryoho Yoga conference, association conference, about brown rice. And, you know, brown rice is something that I love eating. And, you know, ever since I learned about macrobiotics and brown rice, you know, it's been kind of like a staple food in my diet. But I'd like you to share a bit about how you've taken that one step further to get even more, I guess, nutritional value from that whole grain, which is, it's really is a staple for many people's diets around the world. And I guess on balance, also talking about how, you know, although that next step is wonderful, but for someone who maybe doesn't have the time or the, you know, the space to do that, you know, what's the best way to get the most nutrition out of the food that we're eating? So big question.
Yeah. So I guess when you look at societies all around the world, so as a thing, we're just talking about how I did go into all these different dietary philosophies, and there's going to always be different dietary philosophies depending on all the different research that we come up with. But I sort of started letting go of specific things so much and moving towards a more traditional based diet for myself, and looking at these are the tried and tested things that, like, traditionally cultures have existed on, and they've been healthy for and lived, you know, healthy lives for long periods of time. Whereas the more fad diets, you know, they tend to, I think everything has a good effect on us, because generally the first thing they ask you to do is to get rid of all the processed foods and the refined sugars out of your diet. That's pretty much what every single kind of different diet philosophy will say first, and then they have different tweaks, you know, don't eat grains, eat more fat, don't eat fat, do whatever. There's all these different things, and they're all contradictory, and they can be very confusing. But seriously, if you actually just take out all the processed foods from your diet and go back to whole foods, you'll be like way ahead from, you know, and possibly that would be enough. So what I started doing was looking more at a traditional thing, and like traditionally many cultures have existed on grain as their primary food source, because it provides energy and it provides bulk, so it creates satiety in the body as well, and it feeds, like, it's a source of sugar, which all our cells basically need sugar, like glucose, to function. But the trouble is we overload it with refined sugar, and then, you know, it just blows the system. So whole grains release their sugars slowly and gently, and it actually feeds us in a really sustainable way. But what's happening in our modern society, I think a lot of people's digestive systems are very broken. I think we're a fast food society. We don't prepare our food properly, and we certainly don't chew our food properly. And therefore, our digestion and our absorption of that food is being compromised. So this thing about fermenting and soaking and sprouting grains is a way to help basically pre-digest the grain. And traditionally, that's what was always done. Like in traditional cultures, they don't have kind of refrigerators and electricity and all that sort of stuff. And so things do tend to ferment, and they do spend a lot more time making their food and preparing their food, that they're just, it's part of their daily kind of practice. And so things will soak for a certain amount of time, and then that will sit there and be fermenting, and then that will, and in those times, when it's soaking, when it's sprouting, when it's fermenting, other microbes are starting to break down and digest that food for us. So it's not all on us to do. But in our modern societies, we have things that are, you know, pre-cooked, pre-steamed, you know, microwavable, quick. And we haven't taken care of any of the anti-nutrients, which are things that are in the foods to stop them basically being, all grains, seeds and nuts are basically a seed that will grow into another plant. So they have within their structures anti-nutrients to discourage digestion, so that what they want to do is get eaten by an animal and not be digested, and then come out the other end of that animal with fertilizer and grow again. So we have to actually disable those anti-nutrients if we as humans want to actually break down and digest and get all that goodness, and let it, you know, feed us rather than pop out and grow
Yeah.
into another plant.
Yeah.
So the soaking and sprouting process actually helps that to happen. And this is, you know, as a evolved species with a rather large brain, we have the ability to do that. We know about these things, and so we can, rather than animals that don't have that ability. They don't do that. But a lot of those animals that, say, survive on vegetables or grass or things like that, they have more stomachs and they have bugs that they carry around with them. And actually that raw sort of plant material that they're eating is feeding those bugs.
Yeah.
And then they actually feed on the bugs. So they're supporting that population, and then every now and then they'll just digest some of those bugs. And so, yeah, actually raw plant-based foods with no preparation whatsoever are very, very hard to digest and extract the goodness out of. So you need a really highly functioning microbiome, which is, you know, lots of good bugs in there.
Yeah.
And then you also need to prepare it in a proper way. So so then you get all the amazing things that are in that grain, seed, or nut. I mean, that's the thing, like, why would you activate a nut? I don't know, you know, Pete Evans got slammed for talking about that. You know, oh, if only we could activate our nuts. But it does actually prepare the food and make that more available. And seriously, it's super easy. You just have to soak it overnight.
Yeah.
You just soak it in water. And then the sprouting process takes a little longer, because basically you just have to rinse it and dry, like keep it moist for a couple of days in a warm environment, so it actually starts to sprout. And in that process, when it sprouts, what's happening is those complex carbohydrates that are locked in that seed start to break down into simple sugars to feed that plant to grow. And in that moment when it's sprouting, before it's kind of growing into the plant, there's all these nutrients available that are intended to feed that plant to help it grow. But if you eat the thing at that time, then you're getting incredible amounts of nutrition. Like, sprouts are so packed with nutrition. They're like up to 300 times the nutrition of the actual seed itself. Yeah. So like, it's like a superfood, superfood. And so it's so cheap. Like, you know, here we are buying these potions and powders and bottles of, you know, superfoods, thinking, you know, and they've got such good marketing plans around them. But all you need to do is grab a handful of any seed, nut, or grain and sprout it, you know, or soak it and ferment it, and you're making a superfood. Yeah. And that's why I love this whole thing, is because it is so easy, it's so accessible, it's so doable, and it's so cheap, and everyone can do it. You just have to make that time, because actually it's not that much time out of your day. It's just the time waiting, you know, for it to happen. So if you just make it part of your routine, that before you go to bed, you put your thing on to soak, let it soak overnight, rinse it in the morning, let it drain on the dish rack all day, come home, rinse it again, let it drain overnight. And depending on how warm your house is how long it'll take to sprout. So with the brown rice, you only need to have a little tiny tail growing. And even if you can't do the sprouting thing, even just the fermenting thing is going to improve the digestibility of it. And there's a little chart that I could forward to you later, and you could put it in the show notes or something for people to access. But there's a little chart that you can do with just soaking the grains in an acidic substance to help the fermentation process go and to neutralize some of the nutrients. Like, people might have heard of like phytic acid and things like that. That's one of the ones that bind up some of the nutrients and help like make it hard to access those nutrients. So the soaking process gets rid of those. And you just add an acidic substance. So it can be some like good quality apple cider vinegar. It can be some lemon juice. It can be whey from yogurt, like the juice that goes out of your natural yogurt, not a sweetened kind of thickened yogurt. It's just got to be one of those natural, nothing added yogurts, with except obviously the culture. And that liquid also can act as a seed. And then when you're soaking your brown rice, actually, I'll run through, if you like, how to how to do a brown rice one, and then we can put little notes. Each little grain is slightly different.
Yeah.
And different amounts of water and different amounts of time. But for brown rice, if you just wash your brown rice, cover it with water about that much.
So about a couple of inches or so.
Yeah. And then you let it sit overnight. And depending on how warm your place is, so microbes like an ambient temperature. So in the mountains or in cold places, autumn and spring are the hardest times to ferment because we don't have our heaters on.
Yeah.
And it's warm in the day, but it's really cold in the night.
Yeah.
And then so you've got these fluctuating temperatures, and it's really hard for like the microbes to get comfy and start doing their thing. So if you have a coffee machine at home, or if you have a warm place, like I sometimes put it near my stove, so at least when I'm cooking things, it heats up in that area. You can also, if you really want to kick it along, put it in one of those insulated shopping bags with a hot water bottle.
Oh, okay.
And that just gives
good idea.
You a nice consistent temperature overnight. It's a nice, cheap, easy way to do it. Or if you do have a big dehydrator, you can stick it in there on a low temperature.
Yeah. Would you with the bag, the insulated bag, would you zip it up or leave it open?
Yeah, I'd zip it up.
Zip it up. Okay. Yeah.
With a hot water bottle, and then it'll be nice and warm.
Yeah.
And you can use that for doing yogurt, for even rising bread, all sorts of different things.
Love it. Great little tip.
So then the first kind of ferment thing generally takes a few days, and it's fermented when you drag a spoon through it. It's all bubbly. It'll bubble.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you save some of that water so that you just grab some in a jar, pop that in the fridge, and that's going to be like your sourdough starter. It's going to be your seed to start your next one. And the next time you sow, it'll only take a day because you've already put in the kind of fermenting starter.
So you're doing this with rice, you're saying?
Yeah. The first time you start it, it takes a while because, it's just got to build up that population. But if you put that population straight in, then it's already going. So then once you get the bubbles and you've saved your water, you rinse off the rest of the water, and you rinse it really well. So with sprouts, one of the keys to having everything sprout is to rinse it really, really well that first time, because all seeds have growth inhibitors that they put out when they start to sprout because they don't want other plants to grow near them.
Yeah.
It's like a survival thing. It's like, so they're trying to stop other things to sprout. So what they do is if you wash that away, you're encouraging all the other sprouts to sprout, because you actually basically, you've got this little jar or this little bowl or this little sieve that you want everything to sprout in, and that's extremely unnatural. You wouldn't have that many plants growing together in the ground. So if you rinse it really well, then you tend to get them all sprouting. And it's just about rinsing them morning and night. You do that because you just don't want that stagnant water to sit in the thing, especially if it's in a warm environment. Then it goes
go moldy.
To moldy and to kind of putrefying or rotting.
Yeah.
But when we do sort of fermenting type things with people, I know everyone starts to freak out and worry, like, what if it goes off and I don't know? The thing is, you will know.
Yeah.
You always will know. When something putrefies, it's putrid. Like it smells so bad.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not going to be pleasant. The smell that you want, it tends to smell like fermenty. It smells a bit beery, like because that's, they make beer out of fermented grain. It's kind of got that malty kind of, and it's a sweet, yummy flavor.
That's what it is. Because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've been doing the sprouting of the brown rice, and it's like I was trying to describe that smell, and it is kind of like it smells a bit more malty, I guess, when you're cooking it. It's that sort of I just thank you.
So because then that's what it is, and it will be sweeter because the sugars are starting to be released, and and that's what we crave. That and I have to say that it is so much easier to digest, and I've actually had direct experiences of that, because I use that preparation method for the rice that I do in my cleanses. And I've had people come along to those cleanses. I had one lady with Crohn's disease, and she was really sensitive to grains, and she's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the rice. She says, but I'll try. I'm happy to give it a go. I said, okay, well, let's see how you go. And, you know, if it is a problem, let me know and we'll do something else. But she was so excited. She's like, oh my God, I can eat it. And it doesn't bloat me and it doesn't cause me pain. And even at the end of the retreat, she said, this is probably too much information, but I'll let you know I've had the best bowel movement I've had in a long time. And I was so excited by hearing that news, because it means that it's working. And in our yogic philosophy, I know you know that we say that grain heals the digestive system. And this is the sad thing, that so many people who have broken digestive systems are actually avoiding grain and going on these kind of keto and paleo diets and not having the grain at all.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's just that the grain isn't being prepared properly. And when it is prepared properly, it's an amazing food. It's not a damaging, toxic, terrible food. It's actually a very economical, highly nutritious and
satisfying
and healing food.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I was really excited by that. And then I had another lady who was, you know, had been following a paleo diet for a long time, and she was also, I don't know if I can do the grain. They just don't sit well in my gut. And she too was just blown away. So it's definitely, if you do feel like you have digestive issues with grain, I would encourage you to try it. I've always found, because I too, before in my macroneurotic days when I really overdid brown rice, and
has been there, done that.
And I wasn't chewing it very well, and I was just eating lots of it. I got this kind of heavy kind of feeling from over brown rice. And since cooking it in this way, I don't get that. It doesn't sit in my gut. I feel really nourished. And even other ways of preparing grains, like soaking my flour. If I'm going to make pancakes, I'll soak flour in yogurt or acidulated water, and it makes a completely different thing. Like, it just doesn't sit heavy in the gut, and you feel like satisfied for hours and hours, like on into the afternoon if I have that for breakfast. So I really can't sing the praises highly enough of actually fermenting your grains, and especially like coming into the cooler weather. You know, making a porridge with soaked oats is just so nourishing. And, you know, you can have a gently sweet one if you want, with like stewed fruit and yogurt, and do it that way. Or you can do the savory porridge option, which is like just my thing at the moment. I'm just loving tahini and miso and ginger mixed up into a little paste. Just mix that up with some hot water, and then drizzle that on with some sauerkraut and some toasted seeds. Oh my goodness, it's so good.
Coming to your place of breakfast. Oh wow, there's so much. We could talk for hours, I know, but we're going to have to wrap up. So I just firstly just want to thank you so much for sharing so much today about this. And if we can get some notes to share, I'll definitely add those in the show notes for our listeners and viewers on YouTube. And I just would love to ask you my sort of signature question, which is, and you know, you're going to have a lot to choose from, but what is one thing, apart from everything we've already talked about, of course, that has helped you improve your well-being and get more out of life?
I guess one of the biggest ones for me, I have to say, is probably meditation, stillness practices, because it's been my challenge. I've found it really hard. And so, I think the more stillness practice, and even like standing Tai Chi practices and things like that. So it's the non-movement practices that have been game-changing for me. I find them really challenging, but amazing. Like, it just helps clear my mind. And it was actually through the Tai Chi standing practices that I've connected to my lower body a lot better. And I found then all my sit-ups in yoga improved. You know, I was able to really drop my center of gravity, which I wasn't seeming to get that with other things. So it's just like being in that really uncomfortable place of being still and strengthening that connection to the ground and my legs. So
wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I can relate as well. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Danielle. Look forward to having another chat in the not too distant future, and maybe we can share some more amazing food knowledge and experience with our listeners and viewers. Thanks so
Awesome. I
much.
love that. Thank you.